Looking MASH, and even the knee-slapping hilarity of National Lampoon's Animal House. With these films he may seem about as American as apple pie, but Donald Sutherland was a proud Canadian. So how does a country boy from rural Canada become an international icon? For Donald Sutherland it was a long road. Donald Sutherland was born on July 17, 1935 in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada. But the family soon moved out of the city and into the countryside. While living in the sticks, a young Donald Sutherland suffered from rheumatic fever, hepatitis, and polio. Eventually, though, the family decided to move back to the city, where Sutherland could start his career. Sutherland's career had a false start with an interest in puppetry, joining the puppet club in high school. He then got serious and decided on engineering, but while at the University of Toronto, he got the acting bug and added a second major in drama. Eventually, he was going to need to choose between the two disciplines. In 1957, he made his choice, and it prompted a big move. Drama won over engineering, and it led Sutherland to London, England, where he signed up for the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. After a year, he gave up on school, but it was for a good reason. Producer Paul Mislansky saw Sutherland act in London and wanted him for a role in a film. Likely, Sutherland thought this was his big break, but then reality set in. What Mislansky wanted Sutherland for was a low-budget Italian horror film called Castle of the Living Dead. The offer was to play multiple roles, get $40 a week, and sleep on the director's couch. That was good enough for Sutherland. He said goodbye to the stage and hello to low-budget horror. In the end, the film with Mislansky only broke even, so it didn't exactly boost Sutherland to movie stardom. But it did introduce horror film lovers to him. Apparently, they liked him and what they saw. He followed up this film with Dr. Tara's House of Horrors and other scary movies, thinking these films was probably a lot of fun. Sutherland's love of horror films would persist for the rest of his career, but he was about to need a much healthier paycheck. Back in 1959, Sutherland had married schoolteacher Lois May Hardwick. When that marriage ended in divorce, Sutherland married fellow Canadian actor Shirley Douglas. While living in the UK, the couple were preparing to welcome a baby into their little family. When it turned out to be twins, Sutherland had a dilemma. Now, he wasn't just paying for the divorce, he'd have to feed a family of 4 on an actor's salary. But lucky for him, that's exactly when he got a break from a surprising source. Through his work on TV and film, Sutherland had met a fellow Canadian and The Sound of Music star Christopher Plummer. Plummer, who barely knew Sutherland, saw another young actor who just needed a little help. Plummer graciously gave Sutherland $5,000 as an investment in his career. With this financial boost, Sutherland was ready to take Hollywood by storm. In 1967, Sutherland did an episode of The Saint, starring future James Bond portrayer Roger Moore, who also directed the episode. Sutherland must have been quite proud of his work because he asked Moore if he could get a cut of the episode. Sutherland armed himself with the reel of his work and the money from Plummer. There was a role he was after, and he was ready to fight for it. The role Sutherland had his eye on was in Lee Marvin's World War II film The Dirty Dozen. I guess he figured with a cast that size, even an unknown like him had a good chance. Plus, he had another edge. The American movie was shooting in the UK, where Sutherland already was. He still didn't make the cut, but lucky for him, another actor had to drop out. Finally, it was time for Sutherland to step up. Now, he just had to see if he could hold his own against some of the toughest movie stars in Hollywood. Sutherland was now earning $600 per week and acting opposite big stars like Lee Marvin and Charles Bronson. The problem now was trying to stand out next to the other 11 actors. Sutherland would make this happen with his natural charisma and talent, and also a huge dose of luck. There was a pivotal scene in The Dirty Dozen that, in the script anyways, was meant for Sutherland's co-star, Clint Walker. Walker told the director that he was uncomfortable doing the scene, so Sutherland got called up. Naturally, he nailed the scene, and it led him to something even bigger than the Dirty Dozen. Robert Altman was looking for actors to appear in his film MASH, about America's involvement in Korea. Altman wanted someone who could do drama, comedy, and, most importantly, ad-lib dialogue. There was something that Altman saw in that Dirty Dozen scene that caught his eye. Sutherland got the role. But he had no clue what he was in for. When Sutherland showed up for his first day on MASH, he realized that he'd made a big mistake. Altman's chaotic directing style didn't just drive him and his co-stars Elliot Gould crazy. They actually thought he was ruining the film. Instead of talking to Altman directly, Sutherland and Gould went to the studio and asked to have Altman replaced. The studio gave the two stars a hard no. Years later, this event would come back to haunt Sutherland. As it turned out, Sutherland and Gould were completely wrong about Altman's directing style. MASH was a huge hit and went on to be one of 20th Century Fox's most successful films of the early 1970s. It also received 5 Academy Award nominations, including one for Altman. Gould saw his error and apologized to Altman. Sutherland never did and paid the consequences. Gould had apologized to Altman, and his reward was appearing in more of Altman's films. Sutherland had lost favor and never worked with the director again. No matter, Sutherland had more than his fair share of offers. His next film saw him again in a uniform, but once again there would be more than enough trouble on set. Next up for Sutherland was the star-studded Kelly's Heroes. This WHPATU's film was a drama, a comedy, and even a heist film thrown in for good measure. More importantly, they were filming it in Yugoslavia, and Sutherland would be away from his wife Douglas. While he was working on the film, he got some disturbing news from back home. While filming Kelly's Heroes, Sutherland's co-star Clint Eastwood approached him with some bad news. Back in Los Angeles, FBI officials had taken Sutherland's wife in for an outrageous reason. She had tried to purchase explosives. What made matters worse was that she tried to buy them from undercover FBI agents. The next part of the story, Eastwood could not tell without losing his cool. Sutherland knew that his wife was heavily involved in the civil rights movements and had connections to the Black Panthers, so he probably would have put 2 and 2 together. But what Sutherland couldn't believe was what Eastwood told him next. Douglas had tried to pay for the explosives with a personal check. Sutherland loved to tell how Eastwood roared with laughter when he mentioned the check, but he also offered to help Douglas out any way he could. But this was just the start of Sutherland's nightmare on Kelly's Heroes. While Sutherland was filming Kelly's Heroes in Yugoslavia, his wife got a message that no wife ever wants to receive. It said that her husband had become very ill and that she'd better get to Yugoslavia as soon as she could. The final line of the message must have sent a chill down her spine. It said that Sutherland likely wouldn't make it until she arrived. Sutherland had come down with spinal meningitis while in Yugoslavia. This soon deteriorated into a coma, and then Sutherland's heart stopped, and he died. Well, at least for 5 seconds. He did eventually recover and finish making the film. What didn't survive was his marriage to Douglas. They divorced that same year. But this was good timing for Sutherland, because he was about to meet the most beautiful woman in Hollywood. After making the mostly forgettable start, The Revolution Without Me, Sutherland landed another huge role. Jane Fonda was riding high off a recent Academy Award nomination, and Sutherland got a call that he'd be working with her on a thriller called Clute. But for Sutherland, it was more than just a career opportunity. Like Sutherland, Fonda was a passionate activist. It was inevitable that sparks would fly. Sparks did fly between Sutherland and Fonda, both on and off camera. The newly divorced Sutherland and the recently separated Fonda quickly began an affair. Rumor had it that this was a friends with benefits situation, but there was more to this pairing than just animal attraction. Once they got out of bed, Sutherland and Fonda went to work together. They made FTA, a documentary about the show they performed for American GIs. The film sparked controversy because, unlike other similar tours, this one was fiercely critical of America's involvement in Vietnam. The heat continued after FTA, and the friends with benefits were ready to make film number 3 together. Could they hit the hat trick of cinematic success? Next, Sutherland and Fonda would team up for the comedy Steelyard Blues, and it went over like a lead balloon. This forgettable film came and went, and with it went their spicy affair. Fonda moved on to activist Tom Hayden, and Sutherland quickly married Canadian actor Francine Risset. But Risset was about to learn the hard way that being with Donald Sutherland came with complications. British director Nicholas Roeg had an idea for a film, and he knew exactly who he wanted to star in it: Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie. The idea was the horror film Don't Look Now. With his schlocky horror roots, Sutherland was a natural fit, but nothing could have prepared him for this part. Sutherland and Christie had never met before filming, and that director gave a brilliant idea which turned out to be not so brilliant. The very first thing they filmed should be a love scene, just to, get it out of the way. So remember, Sutherland and Christie had never met. And now, first thing in the morning on day 1, they're suddenly sans close and taking directions from a shouting rogue on how to make love. Let's just say this scene would go on to have a life of its own. The love scene between Sutherland and Christie in Don't Look Now immediately became infamous. Before it even hit theaters, they had to cut 9 frames just so the movie wouldn't get an X rating. For Irish audiences, they had to cut the entire scene. Next were the rumors. Someone started saying that in the scene, Sutherland and Christie were actually making love. If this was true, Sutherland had a lot of explaining to do. The rumors about Christie and Sutherland were set ablaze when producer Peter Bart said that what he saw on the set of Don't Look Now was 2 people making love. This rumor got enough traction that Christie's boyfriend, Warren Beatty, punched Roeg in the face over it. But it wasn't even true. Sutherland later said that Bart wasn't even in the room. It was just him, Christie, Roeg, and the cinematographer. On Kelly's Heroes, Sutherland had met a lowly production assistant who bragged to Sutherland that he'd be a big director one day. Sutherland told the production assistant that he would be in all of his movies, likely thinking it would come to nothing. This production assistant was John Landis, and he came back to make sure Sutherland kept his promise. When Sutherland saw the script for Landis's first film, he may have regretted making his promise. The film was Kentucky Fried Movie, and it was an anthology of silly sketches. Not only that, the rest of the cast didn't quite measure up to Sutherland's respectability as an actor. Not surprisingly, the critics didn't think much of this movie, but something did come of it. Landis's next movie would make Sutherland part of a legend. Sutherland has said that he avoided working with the same director twice, but he broke this for his friend Landis. What the young director was offering now was National Lampoon's Animal House. Again, this looked like a silly movie, but Sutherland was good on his word. For his work on the movie, Landis offered Sutherland a payment of $75,000 or a percentage of the box office. Sutherland's decision would go down in Hollywood history. Sutherland took the check over the percentage and summed up his experience on the film as a really good time. But it could have been so much more. You see, Animal House became a classic movie that ended up grossing over $141 million. If Sutherland had taken the percentage of the box office, he would have earned an extra $14 million. Sutherland would now go from idiotic hilarity to one of the most depressing films of the decade. Sutherland had already portrayed a father dealing with the loss of a child in Don't Look Now. So when ordinary people came along, he was ready. This was a bleak tale that had the added excitement of having Robert Redford as a director, and the always smiling sitcom star Mary Tyler Moore playing completely against type. Ordinary People was a huge hit, and award season was just around the corner. Ordinary People had wild audiences, and everyone expected the Academy to shower it with nominations. Sure enough, there were 6 Academy Award nods, including ones for Moore, Timothy Hutton, Redford, Judd Hirsch, and the writer of the film. Missing in action was Sutherland. The film took home 5 trophies on awards night. As a consolation, Sutherland got a Golden Globe nomination, which he lost. There was perhaps a reason why the Academy overlooked Sutherland for this role. When Redford first started preparing for Ordinary People, the studio wanted him to play the lead male role. Redford declined, and the role eventually went to Sutherland, who was happy to be playing something that wasn't his usual oddball character. But there's a twist. Redford later said that he had declined because the character was not interesting to him. Well, I guess he wasn't interesting to the members of the Academy either. In 1981, Sutherland signed up for the British World War II thriller The Eye of the Needle. Sutherland had played Germans before, so he knew the accent already, but there was a wrinkle this time. His character had to pretend to be British, so here was Sutherland, a Canadian, playing a German who was pretending to be English. I can only imagine the accent coach throwing their arms in the air. Sutherland's next feature would get him no closer to that Oscar when he so craved, but it would almost end the career of his co-star. In 1985, Sutherland appeared opposite megastar Al Pacino in Revolution. This film was a disaster both critically and financially, earning 4 Golden Raspberry Award nominations. It was so bad that after its release, Pacino had to stop making movies, at least for 4 years. Not Sutherland, though. He just wiped his feet of this turkey and moved on. And what he moved on to was an epic film that had plenty of Oscar buzz. In 1991, Sutherland joined the star-studded cast of Oliver Stone's JFK. Once again, Sutherland's acting was universally praised in JFK. But when award season came along, it was Tommy Lee Jones who got the nod for his supporting role in JFK. It was time to give up on an Oscar and just do something fun. Well, Sutherland's choice was no fun at all, at least for the writer. In 1992, Sutherland, maybe trying to appeal to a younger demographic, appeared in a film that inspired an iconic TV show, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. When Sutherland arrived on set for the campy teen romp, he quickly started rewriting most of his scenes, and it made him a powerful enemy. The writer was Joss Whedon, who was furious at Sutherland for changing his scripts. Too bad Sutherland made an enemy of Whedon, because some of his films certainly could have used some help with the writing. In 2005, Sutherland returned to Canada to star in a disturbing miniseries about human trafficking. The twist? The incredibly dark series aired on the incredibly light and fluffy Lifetime network. Audiences and critics were scandalized, with one critic even calling the film exploitative to women. Sutherland did manage to get nominated for an Emmy, but still no win. Sutherland was now entering his golden years, and it was time for a franchise. In the 21st century, it seems like any actor playing the Hollywood game eventually has to end up in a franchise. For Sutherland, he joined up with Philip Seymour Hoffman, Woody Harrelson, and the Hunger Games series of films. But if you think that was just a money grab, you don't know Donald Sutherland. The truth is that Sutherland was desperate to appear in the Hunger Games series once he read the script for the first movie. He actually wrote a lengthy email telling the director why the films were politically important and why he should be in them. Director Gary Ross must have been pinching himself. It could only be a dream where a director gets a big name in his film so easily. The Hunger Games series was important to Sutherland, but his name was important to another game. 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon is a game played to link actors to each other and eventually to Kevin Bacon. Ironically, two of the best films to use in this game because they have huge cast and also include Kevin Bacon, also feature Sutherland. These are National Lampoon's Animal House and JFK. Weirdly enough, Sutherland also appeared in a film called 6 Degrees of Separation. In his home country of Canada, Donald Sutherland got a star on the Walk of Fame and a postage stamp. In the U.S., he has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, a couple of Golden Globes, and an Emmy. Of course, what's missing from this list is a mention from the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences. For his entire career, it seemed no matter what he did, the Oscar always eluded him. Sutherland never received an Acting Academy Award or even a nomination, which seems unlikely to be a coincidence. Maybe a cynic might put it down to his activism or his ex-wife's connection to the Black Panther group. At least, the Academy did eventually decide he needed recognition. In 2017, Sutherland received an Academy Honorary Award. Not quite Best Actor, but an honor nonetheless. There may be a reason why the Academy had snubbed Sutherland all those years. In 2017, a startling truth came out of recently declassified documents. Because of Sutherland's anti-Vietnam activities, the CIA had put his name on a list. This was the National Security Agency's watch list. He was on the list from 1971 to 1973. This didn't stop Sutherland from being an activist. He later spoke out against the U.S. invasion of Iraq. If Sutherland had any regrets in his life, it was time to look at them now. Sutherland was never one to spend a lot of time processing his career. In 2023, he said that it was finally time to start going over his life and the work he'd done. As it turned out, he only had 1 year to do that. Sutherland passed following a long illness on June 20, 2024. He was 88 years old. Fans will certainly miss Sutherland, but let's not forget his family. Kiefer Sutherland said that it took him a long time to realize how famous his father actually was. By the time Kiefer was 18 years old, he hadn't seen most of his father's movies. If this seems strange, you have to consider something. Most of Sutherland's early films were R-rated, and Kiefer was too young to watch them. In 2015, Sutherland and his son appeared together as father and son in the Western Forsaken. If you've enjoyed these stories, don't forget to show some love by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel. Stay tuned, because we'll be back with more incredible narratives soon. Thanks for joining us.